Right, over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Andy, very much. And yeah, welcome to everybody who's in the room tonight. And we're just over the 200 marks and rising, which is good to see. Martin, I've known for a fair while, a fellow free flighter, and flies just about everything. A bit of scale you can see sitting on his wardrobe behind him. And this evening he's going to talk classic aerobatics. So I think we're all really interested to hear what Martin's got to say. We're going to let him fire off, and let's hear what you've got to tell us, Martin.
Okay, well, first of all, good evening, everybody. And thank you very, very, very much for taking the time to join us tonight. Hope you enjoy it. Our presentation will take about 35, 40 minutes or so. I'm happy to take a few questions, more than a few questions at the end of it. Basically, for those who don't recognise that model, as you can probably see on the screen moment, that's a Dirty Birdie designed by Joe Briddy and flown by Bill Mitchell, the late Bill Mitchell.
Martin, you need to start your screen share.
I thought I screen shared it, sorry.
Not yet.
Oh, apologies. I've done that once. Just let me try again.
It's an acceptable technical error. It's a bit like being muted.
There we go. Sorry about that. I thought I'd already pressed the buttons to do all the magic already. There we are. That's the first mistake of the evening. Yes, that's the Dirty Birdie designed by Joe Briddy. Very, very classic late 70s, early 80s design, I think. Anyway, this is not going to be an ANRAC evening tonight. It's not all about going through all the different designs and so on, but really to give you an insight into what the UKCAA is all about, and really to hopefully cement a little bit stronger classic aerobatics in the UK. Hopefully, there we go. So this is one of those things really that my background, by the way, Mark alluded to it a few seconds ago. I'm a free flighter. I started flying, I joined the SME in 1970. I was a free flighter right the way through to 1995. But when I was about 15 or 16, I used to go to the Bootle Street Model Shop in Manchester. And I remember sitting in the corner and there was a raft of fuselages, which I think they're all F3A designs. I wasn't actually too sure they were internationals or something like that. And I looked at them, I thought these were absolutely beautiful. That was piqued my interest at that point, but never really did anything about it. So all this time, over the years and years and years, until the about 2000, when after a break of about 5 years, I came back to it, and I thought I would go with this classic F3As and building some of the models I really enjoyed. And through the Model Flying Forum, I bumped into a guy called Steve Dunning, who sadly passed away just 3 or 4 years ago now. And it was one of those conversations. We both had an interest or a love for the aerobatic models of the 70s. And it was one of those discussions on a forum that says, wouldn't it be a good idea? Yes, it would. And that night, we basically hatched a plot to put the UK Classic Aerobatic Association together. And Steve put the little badge there you can see on the right-hand side. I bought the website, which I couldn't believe that was still available. And we announced it to the world the following day. And the questions we got back, as we said, welcome to the UKCAA was the post I put on model flying. And the questions I got back, we thought is the UK Civil Aviation Authority, which was probably not the best start. But since then, there's only ever been one mistake on the Facebook page, and we've managed to keep our distance from each other. So that's basically how it all started. But before that, Paul Bardo, I've heard of Paul Bardo, is an international pilot and racer, a great guy, a lot of time for Paul. But he'd been running same sort of ideas. They're trying to promote classic model flying. It wasn't necessarily just aerobatics. And he had run an event at the Festival Flight, I think it was in 2012. And they ran the first of a classic aerobatic contest, which won by Martin McIntosh. So basically, mid-2003, 2013, we decided to get together. We called an event at Retford because that was Steve's home club. And I remember driving up there, getting thoroughly lost, and it was hammering down with rain, pouring down. And we went into the little steel hut they have down there, and we got chatting. There was about 20 people all crammed in there drinking tea and eating sausages and burgers and stuff like that. We're all just chatting and introducing ourselves and so on. And popped our head out, and the sun was shining. And that was lunchtime, so we'd had a quick lunch already. We just got out there and we had 4 hours of fantastic flying of nothing but aerobatic aircraft, classic aerobatics. It was great. The UKCAA then just sort of developed its constitution. We had our first AGM that year, and that was all right. And we grew to fairly quickly to about 70 members. But at that time, we weren't actually charging a membership fee, but we were running events. When we decided to start charging, because we wanted some money in the kitty to start to pay for some of the ideas they had, membership dropped to about 45. And it says now currently 61 members. We've actually had another member join today. We're now at 62 members. And another one is joining as well. So by the end of the week, I'm expecting to be 63. So that's basically that's the background to where we are and what we do. So what is about the UKCAA? I think the important thing is it's actually stated on the website that to promote the building and flying of pre-turnaround F3A designs have fun. That was the original idea. We actually extended that, as mentioned a couple of points, down to the pre-2x2 era in pre-1995 to bring in some of the more modern designs. We have a very active Facebook presence. I've lost count of the number of members now. It's about 700 people, I think, from around the world. But the great thing is it's mainly UK people contributing to it. And there's a nice healthy turnover. There's no noise, no spam, nothing else. It's all related purely to classic aerobatics. The fourth point down is very, very important. We're not a contest group. We basically try to cater for those pilots who just really want to have a good time. They want to come along, talk to like-minded people, show their models with like-minded pilots and builders and so on. If anybody really wants to fly aerobatic contests, we actually point them in the direction of GBRCA because we feel that we'd probably let them down if they thought that's all we were doing was contests. But we do have contests. I mean, it'd be a shame, and it is part of the constitution that we would have low-key contests, and those are the exact words. This is the pre-turnaround era, and these are actually quite well supported, but these are very, very low-key. The idea is basically we go out there, we have a bit of fun, nobody takes them too seriously, but what we do enjoy is that they're basically a reason to fly these models that they've built or acquired or fitted out. Surprisingly, although we started off in a pre-turnaround, although and asked to extend it to include the pre-2x2 era, most of our members still prefer what we call the ballistic era, or call it the ballistic era, and the very early turnaround designs. So basically, we're looking at models of the 70s and 1980s, which are 30 to 40 years old, and we run normally 9 events a year, just 8 this year. One thing anybody wants to come along, just come along and enjoy yourself. Bring a model, have a crack. You don't have to join, just come and enjoy yourself. And if you want to join, that's fine. And what we find is that most people actually do join, usually on the same day. They really have a very good time. I think we've been very lucky because we've got a very kind weather goddess. And in 2013, what's 8 years now, we've only, I think, had one event that's been totally rained off. Okay, so what about classic aerobatics in general? Well, one thing that's becoming clear is that there are definite groups around Europe and America and in the Southern Hemisphere particularly, and in Japan, all doing their own thing with classic aerobatics. Some are organized, some not so well organized. And I don't mean in a derogatory manner, but they basically are happy just to have one event a year or so on. Sorry, James Wright just asked, what is turnaround and 2x2? I'll come back to you in a second, James, and I'll explain that in a moment to you. So you're right, I should explain that. So we think the UKCAA is the largest organised group in Europe and Asia. In fact, I'm absolutely sure it's the largest in Europe and Asia, and probably the Southern Hemisphere as well, simply because of the geography. The Senior Pilot Association in the USA is definitely bigger than us, but bear in mind they've got a population that's 10 times bigger than ours. We're probably still trumping them on that as well. But we're nothing like the SPA. The SPA has a very rigid set of rules, a framework for rules of you can only fly these airframes with these power plants, and that is it. And the idea was to keep their contest, because they're very contest organised, and balanced. And then a couple of years ago, in fact, it was not quite, it was about 18 months ago, I got involved with a conversation about a requirement to standardise on a set of rules for international contests. And the reason why that Australia had an event planned for the last March or April last year, which unfortunately I think was called off because of COVID. And we got quite heavily involved in that. I'll cover a little bit more about that later on. But it became quite clear at that point that the UKCAA was now representing what we thought was the British Model Flying Association, without actually spelling those words out quite so clearly, but we had no real authority to do that. Although we were recognised as probably the group in the UK that was doing this, I didn't think that we should really be involved in helping develop rules internationally. Something the FAA, by the way, weren't interested in, because of course they're only interested in the modern classes. So that triggered me to then apply to the BMFA. We waited until COVID had eased off a bit, that the UKCAA would apply for a specialist body status, which then would give us representative status. Now, a couple of questions that came up then. Fine. Right, turnaround. What used to happen in the good old days, this is prior to the last World Championships in 1983, was that the models, or the pilot with a model, used to have to fly a series of manoeuvres were specified. And the manoeuvres were always flown upwind, then downwind, then upwind, then downwind, then upwind. And they used to fly the manoeuvres in front of a judge on the centre line. And basically, when they finished the manoeuvre, the model would go off and do something to then basically turn around, change height, or whatever it used to do, and then it would line itself up to start the second manoeuvre, which would be the next one in the sequence. And that was called pre-turnaround. That was the original set of rules, which basically went from early 1960s right up to 1982. The schedules developed as models got better and more powerful, and engines got more powerful. But that was basically what we call pre-turnaround. In 1985, the rules all changed at that point. The rules changed to what's called the turnaround sequence, which is what is in use now, and what the GBRCA fly and the FAA fly in the international and international competitions, the World Championships, so on. And this actually really changed the ball game. What happened now was that there was a schedule which comprised of an upwind manoeuvre. Then there'd be a maneuver which would actually then change the orientation of the aircraft, for example, a stall turn or a split S or something like that, and then point it in the direction, the downwind direction, or the next direction down, where the next sequence maneuver in the sequence would be flown. And then that would then go off and then do another turnaround event. So to the left of it, I'm saying that we're moving, the wind's coming from the right to the left of the pilot and the left of the judges. There will be another turnaround maneuver of some sort, and then the aircraft would then go through and perform the next sequence. No, that had major changes on the design of aircraft. And I'll cover that in a little while, as something I was going to cover, but the style of aircraft, aerobatics, changed incredibly. Now, 2x2 was basically a rule change that came in, I think it was about 1995, after the 1995 World Championships, if I recall. I may have got that wrong, however, I'm sorry. But what happened then is that the models were growing bigger and bigger as the engines got more powerful, and 24 strokes were allowed and so on. And he's realised that there had to be some limit on the aircraft. They're already limited by mass to 5 kilograms. What happened in 1995 was that the model had to fit in a conceptual box no bigger than 2 meters wide and 2 meters long. So that set the boundaries for the airframe. And that is still in place today. And when the aircrafts have continued to develop, fuselages got bigger, they got more wings, they got a lot of biplanes, even triplanes are actually in use and at the modern F3A level. Some people still fly monoplanes as well. But that's basically what 2x2 it is. That's what the 2x2 rules. So we were interested in basically with aircraft which are now up to the 2x2 era. There's Ken Binks joining us. Good evening, Ken. Okay, now our members. Basically, I would say kindly, they are a mixed ability. We've got everything from your average little club flyer to some ex-contest flyers, and that includes flyers who've actually flown and represented Britain in World Championships. And I say on the 60s, that is true. We're a mix of builders, and so we're definitely catering for what I would call the traditional aero modelers. But because of the popularity of these designs, particularly from designers like Hannah Pretner, Wolfgang Mack, and so on, there's a lot of ARTF designs coming out on the market now. And of course, there's a second-hand, the buyers, etc. So on one thing I'm missing off there, of course, is kits, but I call that within the builders as well. What we find is that where people used to fly aimlessly, and you probably see that in your own clubs, is that having these, I've actually they learn a discipline. They start to learn to think about flying and actually centering their maneuvers. So they're taking the unpredictability of what they're doing away. So you tend to find that people fly on the centre lines that do the two loops or the bunts or the Cuban 8s or whatever. And these are all the sorts of maneuvers that we encourage people to fly. But again, I will cover that a bit later. Ted Griffiths has asked what I mean by the ballistic era. Yes, a very good question. I'll cover that in a second or two because there's a few definitions on this which are coming up. But the ballistic ballistic era was definitely something that was very, very popular and actually defined the designer models and the style of flying right the way through to the 70s and into the early 1980s. Okay, so what do we do? Well, as I say, we're not the SPA. We actually do encourage the people, if they want to build a smaller version of an existing design, then by all means build a smaller version of it. The only rules that we stick to is that the model outline really must match what the plan will look like. I've never asked anybody for a plan yet, but it's usually very, very, very obvious when a model has been stretched, shall we say, is the kindest way of putting it. But we still don't stop people flying them. We just don't expect them to fly these models in the contests that we run. Materials and construction methods must be period. Now that's an interesting one. Many designs, for example, I'll give you Wolfgang Mack's famous arrow from about 1980, 81-ish, was originally designed with a wooden fuselage, but of course, when people started replicating it, a glass fuselage was available, and of course, that was a period design, although the design didn't show that. Likewise, we have built-up wings substituting foam wings substituting built-up wings, and so on. We don't really mind what goes on inside the model if people want to make some tweaks in there. These are all things that used to be done back in the days. People always had their own ideas. They pick a design and they would actually develop it and try different things out, just giving that little bit of a leading edge. I was explaining to I think Andy earlier on that we don't have any restrictions on power plants. But since electric came along and we actively encourage people to fly electric if that's what turns them on, we've even got 1 or 2 petrol models along, which you can't restrict these now to a 61 size or 124 stroke. So we don't really have any restrictions on power plants, although we do not like models that are grossly overpowered. You know, if it was something like a Philcraft 1969 power flyer, quick fly, doing unlimited verticals, you'd have to question that because the original couldn't do that. What we do insist on though, is that people don't beat or don't exceed that 5 kilogram limit. And that really defines the size of the models. So that's basically what we set. And we also basically encourage people to build them as light as possible. And I'll allude to that a little bit later. Finally, I think it's worthwhile mentioning that the model of Classic Aerobatics are compared with modern F3A designs, which can be very, very expensive. Can be very cheap to build and fit out. Steve Dunning used to say that he could fit out a complete model for the price of a servo for a modern F3A. I'm not too sure whether that's true or not, but certainly if I can afford to build these things, they usually build 1 or 2 a year, and I keep them going, then you know, I'm certainly not a wealthy person. Okay, so what I've already mentioned with the 1979 international rules that we actually bounced, and we bounced it basically because they had no restrictions on construction, but we have adopted them with our own words. And we've taken the rules identical to everything they wanted, except we had a paragraph in that says that models must be constructed in a style of the period. Now we have to run contests. We said we would run contests. One of the problems we've got is that because we're not actually building state-of-the-art machines, we've actually got to cover or enable people to fly with some form of confidence designs that were from the late 60s, and I do mean the late 60s there, right through till 1984, 85, just before the turnaround era started. And you can't compare them. The designs over that 25-year gap have developed enormously. So one of the problems that we had, and we did discuss this quite a lot, was how to have a system that would actually allow us, models, to compete fairly evenly. Now, Brian Ball, I don't know if Brian's on tonight. If he has, just say hi, Brian. So you can say hi, so you're there. He was basically the real brainchild behind this, and what we've been doing, we talked about having contests for quite a while. I've never really done anything about it. And he basically picked us up by the scruff of our necks. He basically gave us a list of manoeuvres, said pick 5 from that, and that's how Pick 5 was born. And we all went off and we wrote our own little schedules out. So basically, the pilot can choose something, manoeuvres that they feel comfortable with. So you're not, we're going to force them to do anything they feel out of place. They have a difficulty factor, which is called a K factor, applied to them, and we make them pick 2 easy ones, 3 slightly harder. And the Pick 7 was the same again, except there was 5 slightly harder, of which 2 of those were harder again. So the Pick 5 was basically for beginners, and the Pick 7 was developed for the intermediate style flyers. The majority of people come along and they try and fly Pick 7 straight away. If you've never flown a contest schedule before, I'd always strongly suggest you do a Pick 5 and learn to fly, know how to position a model. We coach our members, and we don't just coach them you know, while they're practicing. Well, we can coach them straight after a contest, so they know exactly. They made mistakes, they come around and have a second go, they won't make the same mistake twice, or hopefully not. We have very good membership communications. I try to keep in touch with the members. It's been a bit difficult over the last 12 months to talk about things that have been without driving people around the bend, but normally we have members comms about twice a month, especially during the contest season. We have this idea of little awards, a little shield on the right hand side. And it's something that we have, and broadly what you do, you get a shield and you get a space in there for 10 little plaques. And if you do well in a contest, you get first, second or third, or you get the best pilot's pilot, because we have votes for pilot's pilot, or concours, and we do all that as well. You'll get a little plaque, and you basically stick it to it until you get 10. Shelley, one of our members, has on a mission to actually make us bankrupt, because she goes off to try to win everything, but that's great, it's fantastic, and I'm full support. I've already mentioned our very active Facebook group, and we've got, I think, quite a reasonable website as hosted by Andy Green, with a large plans repository. We've got about 100 plans on there now, and articles, and just masses of information on there for anybody who's actually interested in the UKCAA or in Classic Aerobatics. We don't make it about it. The plans are available to download them, take to your print shop. All the plans are available on the internet somewhere. That's where I've stolen them from. I don't publish plans where they're still commercially available. So what do people fly? Now, we started to talk about this. We're obviously going back to the 1950s. What is considered, and I was reading out in this, the Small Hog in RCM&E this month, but I think most people would consider the Astrohawk was really the granddad of modern aerobatics in 1957. There's a couple there. The top one's Andy Green's, and the bottom one was mine, which is sadly no more after a radio failure. Quite a big aeroplane. It was 72 inch span, and it was originally powered by a VCO 35 or something like that on silence, of course. It needs a Sport 60 or a 4-stroke slightly larger, which Andy flies in is, and it's a great. Really, it's almost like a low-wing trainer nowadays by what we've got. But they are a lovely, lovely aeroplane to fly, and they're really relaxing. And I've always promised to build myself another one day. It's available as a kit, and this version I think is the kit version because it's got strip ailerons. Mine was from the plan because it's got barn door ailerons, and ailerons. And his tailplane is high, my tailplane is low, and that's how you check the difference. But they're both valid. It's plans available from Sarek. And what you do, of course, nowadays we're not flying on reeds anymore. We've got fully proportional radio control. You drop the dihedral and then build it as light as possible. It's a very, very big aeroplane. Well, then moving on. Right, we're starting the 60s. Let's just start to get into more of our era. Can't go anywhere without mentioning Chris Olsen, who I believe passed away last year. Very sad. But his upset, and that's available as a plan from the UKCAA. It was actually, I think, years ahead of its time in its appearance. It's absolutely a beautiful design, and it was just looks so right. And then below that, of course, there's a famous Phil Craft with his with Quick Fly 3, which you think he won the 1967 World Championship with. They're both 67 designs. And there's a video actually on YouTube, which I've deliberately not done videos. I always find them very disjointed when you watch them here. But the video on YouTube actually shows him flying, and he's flying a proportional model because that's what he's flying. But he's flying like he's on reeds. You can see him actually hitting ailerons and multiple things, going ding, 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 as he's actually controlling the roll rate. Incredible, really. But quick flies we see quite a few of. We don't see so many upsets. But quick flies is a very, very, very simple and very easy model to build. Parallel chord wing, it's a box fuselage. It literally goes together in days. I would say a few weeks. It's not a difficult model to build. It really is very, very simple. And it's actually a remarkably good flyer even now. It's obviously the fact is not a good tapered wing is obviously sets it back, but still a really, really super model. And I think our treasurer, Greg Butterworth, may be looking at producing the Quick Fly 3 as a kit, as a modern kit. So if you perhaps talk to him. I didn't mention that, by the way, right at the start. I should have, I'm sorry. There's 3 of us who run the UKCAA. There's myself, there's Greg Butterworth and Paul Saxby. Paul's our chairman, and we're pretty run it as a very, very small group. We don't get too involved with bureaucracy like that. So now the ballistic era, and Ken will probably be groaning by now. Ken Binks is on the call, and Ken Binks is down at the bottom there. This is the ballistic era. Now I mentioned before that the models were flown on a centre line, and what happened was that as the manoeuvres got more complex, it became necessary to fly them faster and faster and faster. So what happened? So what began is they became ballistic. So the models started flying incredibly quickly. I mean, they were probably hitting not far short of 100 miles an hour on the approach of some of the manoeuvres, because we weren't tied for what you did when you were doing your turnaround maneuver. You see, you flew a long way downwind, you get yourself lined up, and you hit the throttle wide open, and you come in at full pelt. And it's great, very, very impressive to watch. I've never seen some of these models flying about full belt. It's really something to see. It's really quite spectacular. The problem is if you make a mistake, you're somewhere in the next county before you get yourself sorted out. Up at the top there, we've got Hanno Pretner, of course. Everybody must have heard of Hanno Pretner on this. It was on the world famous. He's not very well, is Hanno, unfortunately, and his model flying estate is up for sale if anybody wants to raise €250,000. I think that's what they're looking at. Below him was Wolfgang Matt. Wolfgang Matt was, until I think 2 years ago, still flying in international contests. So Wolfgang Matt still stood the test of time. And we've got the Curari and I think that's an Atlas, by the way. I said Aero, but that's actually an Atlas I've got there. They were really the sort of designs that we were looking at in the early 1970s. Ken's came a couple of years later with a pacemaker, and I've recently completed, or last year I finished off a pacemaker. It's a really lovely looking design. I actually prefer it to his Adagio, which came later, but I'm not allowed to say that. So those are the sort of models, and if you look at the top in the Lightning, which is the banner across the top of the city, that's another one that's of the era of the 1970s. So moving on, the 80s. Now this is running up to the start of the turnaround. Now it was quite interesting. Arno Pretner had been developing models that were becoming more and more complex. Variable pitch props, drag flaps, retract undercarriage, tune pipes, of course. And he won the World Championships in 1991, I think. Yes, it was, with the Magic, which was really the sort of the end of the development, which came from the Super Scalori and through the Curari. And it really was a very, very nice airplane. It had anhedral tailplanes, and it was a very nice, elegant design, very, very streamlined. A very, very fast airplane as well. I've had one and flown it. A bit too fast for my comfort, to be honest with you. But in 1983, this is the last year of the pre-turnaround, Arno turned up with this, the Calypso, and it was nothing like he'd ever seen before. It was very, very, very light compared with all the other models, which are now pushing 4 kilograms or so. It was very simple, no variable pitch prop. It had a tracks on it and a tune pipe, but no drag flaps. None of the mix. I probably had a mixture control in there and so on. And it was quite a breezy World Championships that year, according to the records. And you could see that the model was being blown about a little bit, apparently. But nonetheless, he was a super pilot, and he went off and won it. And underneath that was basically the end of the Aurora, which I think is probably the most beautiful F3 ever designed. Was designed by Naruke and Kato, a long line of development going back to the 1960s, which was the Aurora, which was basically the end of the turnaround, and actually still continued to fly in the next World Championships as well. I think Chip Hyde flew one at a time. Very, very fast. In fact, that model was clocked over 100 miles an hour on the approach to the maneuvers. So they were still getting very, very quick indeed. And then, of course, Ken's model, the Adagio. If I've pronounced that wrong, I'm really sorry. I got it totally wrong before. That was Ken's entry in, I think, in the first of the turnaround. He was the 1985 World Championships. I'm not sure it's that model or not. But that was basically the pacemaker and the Adagio. He had another design afterwards, which the name escapes me. But these were the two models that Steve Dunning, before he died, was starting to build and sell as ARTFs and as kits. Sadly, when Steve passed away, they stopped, obviously. But Ken very, very kindly, and I really do very kindly, allowed the UKCAA to sell his plans on his behalf, to his distributor on his behalf, for quite a small fee. But we would make a charity to the to Moorfields Eye Hospital on his behalf from each plan sold. So I made a thing about the Adagio and the pacemaker. We've got quite a few in the club and the association, which we see turning up and down, and it's great. And they are both really super designs. So that brings it started around the early 80s to mid 1980s. Then moving on, of course, we're now up to the late 80s and into the 90s, and of course, in the top right hand corner, the irrepressible Terry Westrop, who was a massive supporter of the UKCAA before he sadly got passed away a few years ago. Terry was killed in a motorcycle accident, totally blameless, but nonetheless, we really lost a legend there at that point. And he basically designed and continued to design, and Brian Ball has actually still continued to develop his designs with the loaded dice. And Apparently he wore that suit, the white suit, for a bit as a bit of a dare or a bet. I'm not too sure. Hanno Prachtner produced Mystic, but since basically the 1980s, his plans were no longer available. He was actually selling them as being sold. The rights to them was sold as kits to a Japanese company, which I think was OK or something. I'm not sure which one it was. So there we have it, and that was Hanno's last design, World Championship winning design in 1993. Came in various number of sizes. He actually flew it as a 60 size version in the World Championships, but he'd done a 90, a 120, all slightly different sizes, but really quite conservative for Hanno. It wasn't. It looks there. It's got quite a long moment arm. It hasn't. And of course, Wolfgang Matt on his Sapphire, which was a development from the 1980s as well. So we see all these models flown through at our events, and there are hundreds of designs you can choose from. And the great thing about it is we have a really quite a high variety of these models. By the way, we've actually got two of Terry's original models flying with us, and we've actually got one model, a Mystic, that was actually signed by Hanno Prachtner, which in my opinion should be in the museum, also flies at our event as well. That's Dave Elam's. So yeah, it's it's great. People do like to fly these models. They're not hanger queens. We also encourage smaller models. We've got the Jetta. That's Simon Ford's beautiful Jetta. It was a design back in the, I think, 70s, right? I think it's Mike Delacour's design, but I'm not absolutely sure. It was basically very much along the lines of Hanno Prachtner's models of the aerobatic, except the wings were slightly more swept back, but very beautiful, and it flies really well. And of course, Paul Bardo has kitted the bullet on the 60 size caliber. There's quite a few bullets around, and I don't know the way they go to the shows, but Team Renegade do a sequence with bullets, which is great because it actually shows what these models will do, and they're very competent pilots, of course. And we have people turn up with 20 size models and so on. We don't turn anything away. We encourage people to come along, see what they've got, and let's see them fly them. So I mentioned power plants. People ask me what size do we do. All we can really advise you, I'm not an electric specialist, but what it appears to be, if it's a 60 size model, you need a 6S based system with probably about a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. Petrol, 60 size, again, you tend to equate to probably 20 cc petrol, but then you've got the noise problem. We're very keen that models are not overly noisy. It can be a bit difficult at times because an air model with a tune pipe has a very different exhaust note, which tends to upset people. But the models aren't unduly noisy, they just sound different. For most of this, I mentioned they're on most of the 60s and early 70s designs, modern sportmen's, the SCs, the SBs, and so on, are more than adequate, and they're right and cheap and cheerful way of getting into that. You don't need a tune pipe. In fact, we've got members who are actually now moving away from tune pipes completely because of noise. They tend to go for a 91 or the OSAX range, the 65, 75 size, with standard silencers on, because they're very powerful, but most, even the 55 is probably equal to a reasonable powered 60 sized engine. And of course, you've got this classic racing engines. The engine you can see there on the right of you. We've got got a small mortgage, is a Hanno special, an OS61 Hanno special. This pumped engine. We've got them in the club. People do use them, but the price they go for, a brand new in box on eBay, is actually frightening. It is, in my opinion, silly money for what collectors will pay. But there we go. Right, I mentioned pick 5 and pick 7. I'm going to run through this fairly quickly. It's very simple. The pilot chooses their own schedule. They turn up with a form which says this is what I'm going to fly, and then they fly it. Very simple. So from pick 5, well, before us doing that, let's just cover this. We get quite a lot of club flights coming along, and they try to fly competitions. And one of the biggest problems that every club flyer does is to fly far too close. They fly maybe 20 meters, 30 meters out. So if they're pulling a what we should be looking at really is between 50 to, it says 150, but I say probably 120 meters away. 50 meters for a small model, a 40 size model. But choose your baseline and choose your top line and stick to them and learn to fly maneuvers an area. You don't want to be craning your neck looking upwards as a pilot. You want to be looking, upwards, and you want to be looking slightly upwards on the baseline. And we basically pick a distant object. We have a helper who then counts down so the pilot can concentrate flying, getting the wings straight and level. And the pilot and the helper will then say your next maneuver is 2 inside loops, and they'll give a countdown 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, center. So the pilot knows when the center is and they can start their maneuver. If they have to produce a maneuver like a figure M, which starts slightly earlier than that, the helper then can give them some guidance of when they think they should be starting that. So if you are thinking about starting aerobatics, I'm pretty sure the GBRCA will say the same thing. Don't fly so close in. Learn to fly a good way away. We're not looking at how pretty the model is. We're looking at the shape or the pattern that the model flies in the air. So pick 5, and this is what you've got to do. You pick 3 upwind, 2 downwind from that selection. And very simple, 2 inside loop, a square loop, a double Immelman, a Cuban 8, which can be flown upwind or downwind for a pick 5, and optionally a 2 or 3 turn spin. I can't remember how many it is on that one. And if you do use a spin, you finish on the spin. That's an unwritten law of aerobatics. You always finish on the spin if there is one. And then downwind, it's outside loops, straight inverted flight, a couple of rolls or a slow roll, or again a Cuban 8. There's nothing for your average club flyer. There's nothing there that should be too alarming for you. It's all slightly probably above BMFA A level, but at a B level, if you can fly a B, you can fly these maneuvers without any problem at all. And of course, there's nobody there to fail you if you do get one wrong. We're pretty generous on this marking, in fact, and if it's a raw beginner and they make a total hash of it, we'll just tell them to go off and do it again. We want to encourage people to come and fly. We don't want them to go away feeling that they've been cheated in some way or whatever. So that's broadly what we do. We're still great fans of ribbon diagrams, by the way. We still like them. I think they're far easier to read than the newfangled systems. Pick 7 starts to get a bit more complex. Some of the maneuvers are the same, okay, but we got a 4-point roll going downwind, and upwind we're looking at a square loop on a corner, which are the diamond-shaped ones. The triangle loop is actually reverse, apparently, according to one of our members, for Terry, one of our members, who basically says not how we used to do it in the old days, but that's the way we do it. And then probably the most difficult maneuver on that list, I think, is the avalanche, which is a loop with a snap roll in the middle of it. And the reason why it's very difficult is snap roll is basically a spin about its own axis. It's not a flick roll. So the model must rotate about its own axis, just like you're doing a spin. And so 1 turn snap. But the problem is that you're doing your 1 turn snap, you've lost your momentum. And very often your nose will just drop at that point. So you've got to keep the power on. And then it's very, very difficult to actually get into the second part of the loop and keep that loop nice and circular. So that's my view on it. I've only seen one of our members do that once really, really well. It was James Ford. It did a cracking roll. He was absolutely perfect. I'm not going to go through what the maneuvers are. I haven't got really time to do that tonight. But all these documentations is available from the UKCAA website, and you can download. Well, you're welcome to download it. It's got full descriptors, so it tells you what you're looking for and where you like to get downgraded. I mentioned 1979. We were planning to launch this last year, then COVID hit us, and then nobody's had a chance to promote it. So for next year, and providing the sufficient demand, well, this is what the 1979 schedule will look like. We don't mark takeoffs and landings. And you can see now this is no choice in this. This is what you've got to do in this sequence. So you basically got number 1 is the upwind, number 2 is the downwind, reversed in that from that picture, of course. 3 upwind, 4 down. Some of them you've seen before. We're now 3 outside loops instead of 2. 4-point roll we mentioned, 3 inside loops, but from the bottom. The 8-point roll is quite challenging. Gordon Whitehead was spokesperson about the 4-point and 8-point rolls. I've seen him do both, and I'm sure he said to me he thought the 8-point roll was easier than a 4-point. We find with 4 points, what most people do is tend to skip the third point of the roll. It should be a 1 second pause at each point. And so therefore the whole maneuver should take not less than 4 seconds and probably not more than 6. The 3 horizontal rolls, well, most people can probably manage that, but keeping them actual is a challenge. The rolling 8 is actually, it looks quite simple, but it's actually really quite difficult. That's one of the maneuvers that really does go sky high. You start from the high line, you pull a loop, and then do a roll on the base and come round and do another inside loop, I think, but it's very, very difficult to keep the top and bottom halves of the 8 lined up nicely. I found that far more difficult than a Cuban 8, which is a horizontal 8 with 45-degree turns. And of course, you finish off with a spin mandatorily. So, right, going forward. Right, so getting started. Well, I've already mentioned there's some ARTFs. There's a company called Sky Aviation that's accessible from the classicpattern.com website. They have at least the Arrow, the Comet and Marabou as ARTFs. And if you like the English in that, I've helped a lot with, again, trying to get the English translations right. And then from a company called Schweighofer, and I'm not sure of actually, it's Schweighofer, I think it is, they do a Curari, and there are hundreds of those around. We've had at least 3 in the UKCAA that have turned up. They fly incredibly well on a 55. They're a lot lighter than Hanno's original. And if you look inside them, they're built like a very modern aerobatic model with cut-out formers and things like that, and all laser cuts. Beautiful aircraft. And kits, of course, I've mentioned Paul Bardo. He sells, I think they go through Cloud Models, I think, the Caliber, the Bullet and the Tornado. And Mick Reeve Models have recently relaunched the Gangster 63. And of course, you've got the plans from Sarek. They've got bucketfuls of them. But the UKCAA has probably the largest selection of plans in one place anywhere in the world. We've got most of them have come from the American side. I make no excuses about that. There are a lot of, but there's some very, 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 very nice designs out there, which you're welcome to download. There's also the Associated magazine articles available to download. Most of the magazines are no longer in print, so we're running into any copyright issues. Certainly my print shop has no problems with printing them off. So that's basically where we are with that. Our events calendar for this year is looking like this, although we may have to slip the 16th of May one or swap it. The reason why is the COVID restrictions don't end until I think the 18th of May or 17th of May. And the club are a bit nervous that they may be breaching COVID restrictions. So I've left an email today. We've put any UKCAA members on this, just start penciling perhaps the following weekend, or I may swap it with another one. Normally run them once a month, but because we're running late this year because of COVID, they're every 3 weeks. They're all fly-ins with a bit of a contest, except for Retford, although I think we may be able to run a small contest there first thing in the morning before the members turn up. Huddersfield is mainly a contest day. We run this for the Huddersfield Club, and they get all their guys out, and we have a really, really great day. If there's a day, for example, where we don't have a barbecue laid on by the club, and the clubs do tend to spoil as a treat, then the UKCAA will lay on a barbecue, and we'll also put a contribution to the cost of the barbecue on the club. Like I say, you pay your subs, and we try and make everything free first of the year. Right. Finally, these are available there. There's the UKCAA, of course, classicpattern.com. They do English and German pages. And seniorpattern.com just shows what the Americans are doing, and have a look at them. Again, chalk and cheese, all 3 of them really, and hopefully all useful resources. Right, with that's where I am with this one so far. Before I close this slide, Watford locations at Watford Wayfarers is there, which is I don't really describe where it is because I don't know that well. I just follow my sat nav, but it's a beautiful location near some horses and paddocks, so they're very, very noise conscious. Mind you, Salt Huddersfield, that's near horses and paddocks as well. Right,
Martin, that is just fantastic. Thank you. I mean, you went through, you covered just about everything, I think, there, and the questions have been kept to a minimum, I think, because you've answered most of them. But we've got a few here. I don't know whether you want to take a glass of water first.
I'll do that. Let me just
or wine.
Share a PowerPoint and put this up the front. What I've got running in the background, I'll need to bring this down a bit because you'll be able to see that. And if you run the first slideshow from the beginning, hopefully that should, come on, talk to me. There we go. These are some slides which are taken from, and you'll see in the middle, by the way, is Terry Westrop, just a second ago. Right, what's the age profile of your members? Basically, very much like the BMFA, that's Scheighofer Curari, by the way. So we're basically on the elderly side. Probably slightly younger than the BMFA profile because we've got people who've come along. I would guess we're probably average age is probably mid-50s, I would guess, with one or two younger members, which are more than welcome to come along. And the great thing is that the younger members seem to have a great time as well. The group view and lecture power models, all classic aerobatic models are welcome. We don't any prejudice. And it makes something here. I would guess that probably about 25 to 30% of models turn out of the are electric powered of various sizes. The bullet you can see on the screen is Minty Morton's, and that's electric powered, I think. We get quite a real mix. So there's nothing there that's any surprises. Right, let me have a look. Okay, you're going for them. Right, Kevin Caden. Oh, do you mind me answering one of the questions? Applies too much. Yes, I think we've covered that. That's correct. Yes. So what's basically happened is now the almost for modern aerobatics, they're almost exclusive electric now, with still one or two people, including CPLR, the current world champion, still I think it runs rather large, I think about 40cc supercharged glow powered engine. Trevor Waters, the builder of the model rule. The builder of the model rules, the splitter of men, shall we call it. Yeah, so what happened was back in the early days, and this was the early days back and really until club flying really took off and the BMFA was conceived and became an entity. If you wanted to fly in a competition, you had to build your own model, and that was the rule. That was basically it. So you had to fly, and you would never demonstrate. And the builder model rule still applies, I think, for international scale events. But it became a problem as kits become more advanced, and how you would prove that a model has actually been built by the pilot, and you couldn't. The problem was that when you took that away, it then allowed for a cottage industry of manufacturers, and it was a cottage industry, and it still exists today. And without being the derogatory, that, by the way, is me with my Mamma Mia, which is a model, a very large model anyway, going back to the building model. So there was a cottage industry came out. But the fact is that there's no longer a requirement to build your own models as there was back in the 70s right through till the late 1980s, I think it was, when it was dropped. So that was the builder model rule. We don't apply it. People turn up with a model they've bought or they built or they've assembled. That doesn't make any difference to us. You come along, you fly. And that's what it. That's by the way on the screen now is a superstar. Matt's earliest contest model from 1969. Another beautiful aircraft, very fish-shaped it was. Mark, right. So, will the Dave Smith model, yes, Sapphire 40, yes, absolutely. If you can get hold of one. Unfortunately, DSM Dave Smith models was a great provider of these kits in the 80s. They dried up at some time, but we have still quite a few DSM models coming along, and it's just they're all eligible. Anything that was designed prior to 1995. Philcross Barfly, by the way, on the screen. Can you buy kits for 80s and 90s types that you've shown? The ones that I know available are the ones through PD Models I've mentioned, Mark. What else is available? It's a good question. In the States, there are a number of part kits. They're either laser cut kits and so on. We have considered, and this is UKCAA, actually producing parts kits. So all the hard bits are cut out for you. You just have to provide any sheet or four wings and so on, which are fairly easy to get hold of. It's something that we're still working on, that sort of idea. We're still working on. I mentioned the quick fly earlier on that Greg Butterworth has been working on. I've done a rescale of 3 40 size models. Oh, sorry, 3 models down to 40 size. There's quite a few who like flying this size model in there. So their plans are available, but they're all CAD produced. So that if you wanted to build one, you can have the CAD files by free and just get somebody to produce a kit for you. And my most recent model is a Mystic, which I've scaled down from the 60 size down to about 64 inch span. And the idea is to run it with an OS 55 on a standard silencer, and hoping that would go well. That's Shelley, who tries to win everything. Savros. Have we got a column in the BMFA mag? We don't. We've actually fairly well covered on model flying, and I'm happy to write something for the BMFA mag. I'm not sure I would want to do a bi-monthly column in that. We probably wouldn't have enough news from there. But there's certainly scope, I think, for classic classic air modelings in general, which sits somewhere between SAM 35, which looks after the more vintage side, and really the sort of more modern stuff, which is the dawn of the sort of cottage industry built aircraft. So something we think about that. I've mentioned whether Watford location isn't. When we arrange events, what happens is that 2 weeks before the event, all our members and anybody else who's registered interest will get an email from me saying that the event is on, and they'll get a map and stat-nav coordinates and stuff like that, and any gotchas and things like that where you might come unstuck. So, and then what we do is that we then go down our knees and pray to our weather goddess for 12 days. And then the Friday beforehand, when the weather looks like it's going to be amazing, like it usually is, we then put a final email out basically telling them what's happening. I want an idea of numbers, so the club, if they're laying on a barbecue particularly, is quite important. They don't buy food to throw it away. Are aware of the number of people turning up and so on. And then we all congregate. We meet up between 9:30 and 10 o'clock in the morning. We have a very important pilot's briefing, so everybody knows what's going on, what the plans for the day are, what the schedule is, how the sun is, anything about the site, because of course these locations are usually unknown to many of our members. And basically that's what we do, and that's all about communications and keeping it happened. From Graham Green, that's a good question. I understand that. I can't really answer that online because simply it's not really me to say what's happening. I'm not too sure whether the kit will ever materialise or not, but I know that the guy who's planning to build the Mike Birch Capricorn, or was thinking about offering it, has done a lot of work. So therefore, he may well be very interested in returning some money from that. What would your recommendation for UKCAA starter model would be? A lot would be probably one or two, would be either one of three. One of Paul Bardow's designs, either the Bullet for 40 size, the Caliber, or the Tornado. They're all absolute excellent flying. If you haven't done any contest flying or flown any scheduled flying before, the great thing about it, they're all very, very forgiving. The 40 size model is really cheap and cheerful to fly, but they do get blown about a bit in a precision event, and that's probably one of the biggest problems with it. You really need to have some. I was reading an article, in fact, on the UKCAA website now, about a guy who's promoting his own 40 size model. And he basically says, and you can't argue with the physics, is that basically what you're doing, you're actually carrying momentum. Okay, and basically he said that it's mass, and energy is the momentum is a mass equals, and it's a mass times velocity squared. So there, if you drop the mass, you've just got to increase the velocity, which basically means you're flying them even faster again. And he designed this 40 size model, which is very, very pretty looking aircraft. But I'd hate to think how fast he'd be flying it to actually carry the same momentum as the 60 size model. And the problem is, if you do make a mistake, it can take a long time to recover from it. So what we suggest to people who have not really done anything like this, and the Curare there, which has got James holding it, I think. These are fast, they're quite fast aeroplanes. Great to watch, but if you make a mistake, you can be in a lot of trouble. Ed Carmes, yes, maximum for this is John Minchell. Hey, good evening, John. Would that be legal? Yes, well, with a Super Tiger 25cc, your problem might be it will be the weight and the noise. The Super Tiger 25cc is a good engine, excellent engine. I don't think that would be a problem. But if it's pre 2x2, then yes, that's not an issue. Anything pre 2x2 is okay. I don't know the maximum though. Ed Casimir's likes Taurus. Yes, Paul Bardo flies a Taurus, and it's another beautiful looking aeroplane. So that's coming along, no problem at all. Sorry, I just saw that one. Moonglow is an acceptable model. Moonglow is a beautiful model. It really is a genuine classic. Shelley Redworth, who mentioned before, has got one. She brings it along to the meetings. And it's beautifully built, and it's covered in tissue like the original one, and find the same colour scheme. And I suspect it's probably even got the Hazen District Model Aircraft Club stickers on it as well now as well. Even got the original Moonglow. I've got the what's the brand? What I'm looking for? The designer's smear number on. So there we go. Right, 8:30.
You're all right, You're all right, Martin. You carry on.
No, I've covered everybody. Have I missed anything?
Let me ask you a couple. Give you a few moments to take a breather.
Get the breath back. Right, I can put it in the screen now. Sorry.
Yeah. So Valdis asks, just built a flea fly.
Yes.
Hope it's on the thumbs up list.
Yeah, definitely on the thumbs up list. I've got a flea fly. Brian Ball's got a flea fly. I think Martin McIntosh, who was a very, very good pilot, and still is a very good pilot, to be careful here, pilot for representing Britain at World Championship level, has got a flea fly. We'll fly them. Again, they're on the small side. I was flying mine at Shrewsbury a few years ago. Mine's electric powered, by the way, to show I'm not a sure can be a bit of an anarchist at the time. I was looking at it and I was thinking, oh, that beautiful, it's a beautiful blue sky. There, could you see this lovely white puff of exhaust smoke? And I thought, hang on a minute, there's no engine in there. As a model sort of, didn't actually burn up in the air, but the electrics did. But I got it down in one piece. But yes, flea flies are definitely in, all that sort of stuff. The bar flea fly, and there was slightly larger versions of them both as well were released. Yeah, we're really very open, but the important thing is it's all about getting together and really having a bit of fun, but putting a bit of discipline into flying as well, giving a reason to fly and going out there and just enjoying yourself. That's one thing we found, that pilots are definitely getting better after coming to our events, a few of our events, and it's been noticed. Not me just saying that. Other people have come up to me and said, "Oh, that's getting better. Yeah, I understand that. Got he's flying better or whatever." And you can see it. So there we go.
Yeah, Michael Campbell's just asked, are there any UK suppliers doing short kits of the Curare?
Sorry, Mark.
Sorry. Are there any UK suppliers doing short kits for the Curare?
Short kits. That's a very good question. The ARTF's available. I know foam wings and tails is available. It wouldn't be difficult if somebody, if 2 or 3 people came to me and said they would like a short kit, I would put one together for them. There's no problem at all. I've got the CAD solutions. I've got a very good relationship with a couple of laser cutters, and what we do is we I get the parts cut, they come back to me, I build one like I built the Mystic, and then they'll go to somebody else to build one to prove it. But with a Curari, this is really quite straightforward because it's an established and well-known plan, and we can actually cut out the middleman. We can go with that straight away, provided the parts are actually cut. So they'll be peer reviewed, Mark, before we put anything out.
Another question right from early on was John Collister asked whether achievement scheme certificates were required to be flying.
You want Mark Ben's contact details here for this one? I'll let you answer that one, Mark.
Yep. Say that one again, Martin. Sorry.
It's a question from Felix. Just on the chat line, sorry, not questions.
Okay. Yeah.
Drop me an email. I'll pass it on to Mark, and then he can get back to you.
It's okay. Is it all right, Felix? I'm sure that is.
Oh, right. Oh, I see. Sorry. Yes. Yeah, got that one.
Paul Hatton. Sunshine Models in Germany do a Curari glass fuselage, foam wing and tail. That's great. We're actually thinking, I don't know where we are with it though, we've got an original Arrow glass fibre fuselage. We're thinking of making wool from that and providing Arrow fuselages sometime in the future. But it's one of these things. Eric Friend has an unstarted MFA Chevron kit and chose HP 61, a Weber 60 and a Miracle 49. If it's a Weber 60, Weber 60, I would probably go for that, because that might, will that be okay? And the standard silencers on these be okay. Now, the standard silencers, yes, that's a very good point. Silencing has gotten a lot better, and I really can't say yay or nay without seeing the setup. What you can do, though, is make some steps to try and deaden the sound in the model. So you stop them resonating, a little block of foam in the rear of the fuselage. You can mount the engine mount. Go for a nylon mount or an aluminium mount, but mount it on rubber. I use wall mounts, rubber wall mounts. Just don't tighten the screws up too tight. In fact, the aircraft you probably saw earlier on, the pink one, the pink, black and white one I was carrying out, the Mamma Mia, which is Joe Bridges' design, by the way. That actually has the engine so loose, the Weber 91, it actually shakes alarmingly at takeover. It's dinghy, whole engine shaking like mad. People got used to it now, but it puts people off. But it does help keep the sound down. It really does. So that's what I would suggest with that one.
Yeah, one question, Martin. Have you got? Sorry, just there was one from earlier. Do you need any achievement scheme certificates for flying with you guys?
Say again, sorry.
Do you need any? Do you need any achievement scheme certification?
Ah, right. Yeah, that's what we expect. But because we don't fly shows or we don't fly the nationals, we expect everybody to have an A certificate as a minimum. We encourage people to go for the B, because that's what people should be doing, but we don't enforce it. There is some talk, or we've actually been asked. I've actually formally suggested that the UKCAA puts on a demonstration at the nationals. Obviously, probably not this year, maybe next year. In which case, it will be a B pilots only. But I'll be looking for volunteers. What I don't want to do is put a show on and find out it's not really supported. Right, John Minshall, seen the book. I'm not aware of that one, to be honest with you. Model Aircraft Precision Aerobatics. I've got 2 or 3 books around. The one was by Andy Nichols and somebody else, which was on a series of books, which is actually pretty useful because that actually deals with the era we're talking about, and actually use a Gangster 63 as a reference model. Can you still buy kits? I've answered Mark's question, I think. Right.
Yeah,
I've answered that one. The Watford location are best. Done. Answer that one and done, I think.
There should be one question there, Martin, I think. Or did we answer that one?
Oh, what was it? It disappeared, sorry.
Sorry, it just disappeared off the screen. We've lost it now. Yeah, Mark Aris, can you still buy kits for the 80s and 90s types you've shown?
I saw Mark's about the kits. Was that the question?
Yes.
Sorry, I thought I'd answered that one. Yeah, the only ones I'm aware of, Mark, were the ones from Mick Reeves and from Paul Bardo, the ones in the UK. I did start to talk about what the Americans are doing. The Americans are doing a series of short kits, laser cut parts and so on. which the problem is they tend to sell them with foam wings. Buying the kits alone, the wood kit parts may be an option, and then getting the foam parts cut in the UK will probably be the best option. But having a set of laser cut parts, which have actually already been pushed out, probably wouldn't be too prohibitively expensive. I'd have to look around, but it's worthwhile just Googling short kits, after kits F3A USA. But I'd have to go back and have a look. If I can find out where it was, I'll put a link onto the UKCAA on the UKCAA Facebook page.
Oh, thank you, Martin. No, that's absolutely brilliant. Well, the questions have run out, which is really wonderful because the timing's pretty cool on that one. There's been lots of comments about thank you very much. Everybody's been really interested in everything. There's lots and lots of comments there, which obviously we can take a look at in the close afterwards, Martin, and possibly those that we can post some answers to on the website. There's quite a lot of information there from people and some links and that. Certain people want you to identify a plane and that, but I'll let you dare to click that link later. We won't do it live just in case.
Okay.
But no, thank you very much indeed. I'll just take this opportunity while everybody's sort of gone quiet a little bit, just to sort of pick up on next week's webinar that we've got, which is this one's a silent flight, and it's with Greg Lewis again. Greg is going to talk to us about silent flight, an introduction to it. So that should be rather good. Some amazing planes on the website there. So get your registration in nice and early, and we'd love to see you again next week. Andy, I don't know whether there's anything else. Have you got anything on this week? No more question time?
No, I've got I wouldn't say a Zoom-free week, but less on this week than normal. So now the next webinar is next Tuesday's session with Greg.
Yeah, well, look, Martin, we just thank you, and there's lots of people thanking you on the chat as well. It was really, really comprehensive, and what we'll do is we'll start to close down the live feed. And
we'll just say thank you to everybody joining us on Facebook, absolutely. And see you all next week.
Thank you indeed.
And we